today to the first in our webinar series, Topics in Research Data Management. My name is Courtney Mumma. I'm the Deputy Director of the Texas Digital Library. And you see in the glasses there, Leah DeForest, who is our communications strategist, and I'll introduce our guest speaker in just a moment. On behalf of the Texas Data Repository Steering Committee, I'm pleased to welcome you to the first in our series of webinars on topics in research data management. Righty. So before we get started, I want to briefly orient you to the controls in BlueJeans that you should see across the top of your screen. You can toggle off and on your webcam and microphone by using these first two buttons that you see here. Your microphone should be muted when you come into the meeting, and we ask that you keep it muted unless you're speaking to reduce noise in the room, please. If you're having audio issues and using your computer audio or mic, you can switch to phone audio by clicking on that little down arrow that's right next to the microphone icon there. And then also, if you have any questions or comments during the presentation today, you can use the chat window, which you'll see in the upper right corner of the screen. Just click on that to open up chat and enter your question. We'll address all the questions at the end. And if you experience any technical difficulties during the presentation, just let us know in chat. Leah is going to put her email address and my email address in chat. So if you're having problems, one of us will see the issue and try to help you during the course of today's talk. So just a brief introduction to the Texas Data Repository. The Texas Data Repository, or the TDR, is a multi-tenant Dataverse application which was launched by the Texas Digital Library in late 2016. Dataverse is an open source web application used to share, preserve, cite, explore, and analyze research data. There are 11 TDL member institutions who serve on the TDR Steering Committee to provide feedback and make decisions about TDR services. The purpose of the committee is to provide strategic planning support and policy oversight to ensure the focus and the direction of our programs and services. So the series of webinars that we'll be presenting, of which this is the first, is called, again, the Topics in Research Data Management. TDL and the steering committee present this. It's free every time, and we have several different experts in academic libraries throughout North America who will be presenting. So if you'd like to see information about the upcoming webinars, please do follow the link provided here. We'll also provide access to these slides and Amber's slides afterwards in the Texas Digital Library's DSpace open repository. And finally, I'm excited to introduce today's guest. Amber Leahey is the Data and GIS Librarian at Scholars Portal, the service arm of the Ontario Council of University Libraries, or OCUL, based at the University of Toronto Libraries. Amber will discuss the use of Dataverse in Canada and the role of libraries and consortia in providing RDM platforms and services. So if you'll bear with us for a moment while we switch screen sharing abilities.
Okay, hi everyone. So I'm just gonna start sharing my screen now. Can everyone see it?
Looks great. Yep.
Okay, and then I'm just gonna turn off this little video box and then put that away. Okay, that's much better. So thank you, Courtney, for inviting me to come and talk to your group. I think we were chatting about this briefly beforehand, but I think there's a lot of similarities between what we're doing here in Ontario and what you guys are doing in Texas. And so I wanted to talk to you today about how we're building Dataverse for the Canadian research community and some of our experiences in using it to date here in Ontario, and really just to strive to give you a picture of what libraries and consortia are doing with data and RDM platforms and services, which you're all very familiar with, but I think that it it brings a lot of strength to the Dataverse community. Okay, so just briefly about OCL. OCL is the Ontario Council of University Libraries. It's a consortium that was established in 1967. It is comprised of 21 universities in Ontario, the large province with diverse needs. And really what they strive to do and have a strong focus in is innovative information services. So one of the things that the OCL group did in the early 2000s was establish Scholars Portal, which is really the service arm of the consortium. It's located at the University of Toronto, and it houses a diverse digital collection and services. And so you can see on the bottom here, we have a books collection and portal. We have a eJournals collection and portal. It's over 50 million journals, so it's one of the largest in the world. And we have a number of data services, which is something that the community felt really strongly about, and there's a lot of interest from specialist librarians within the consortium who collaborated to build these services. So the Scholars Geo Portal, Odyssey, there's an accessible text repository, ACE, Racer for interlibrary loans, Dataverse for research data, which I'm going to talk to you about today, and Ask, which is a Ask a Librarian chat service that we offer to our community. And really the focus for Scholars Portal is to provide that long-term access to licensed and open resources and to provide and preservation. So in 2013, we actually went through the process of becoming a trusted digital repository for the eJournals repository. So building on the eJournals and books, we have a number of data services that we provide out. So I was mentioning Odyssey, which was our first data service, which aims to provide access to statistical surveys and opinion polls that are licensed or provided to the or are part of the library's collections that they wish to provide access to researchers. So this is sort of our beginning era of data services at Scholars Portal. And then in 2011, we received a grant to build Scholars Geo Portal, which houses geospatial data and digitized maps. And then shortly after that, in 2012, we decided to embark on a Dataverse instance to house research data. And overarching all of these services is this rich sort of search and discovery layer. We provide standard metadata for all of these collections, and we also offer the users to directly download the data from these portals. We also have digital preservation services. I was mentioning it's a focus for us. So established in 2015, we built a Ontario Library Research Cloud, which is a private cloud storage built on the Swift object storage standard, and it's basically a network of 5 nodes across the province, and it's primarily used for preservation storage. And then building on top of this is a service called Permafrost, which is a hosted Archivematica service with connections to the OLRC for that long-term storage. So Archivematica is hosted here, and it's processing files that is then being stored on the OLRC. And again, I mentioned the TDR for eJournals. So in terms of what we're doing, in terms of what the local schools are doing, each school sort of has their own data and RDM librarians, and they're providing all the local support to researchers, as well as promoting and providing access to the Scholars Portal resources. So we don't provide local support to researchers if at all possible. We mostly just work with the libraries who then provide that support. And the librarians, they work collaboratively through, we call them communities. So there's an OCL data community and an OCL geo community, and these groups work towards collection development, licensing. They also help to oversee and govern the work of the Scholars Portal team. So just an idea, like local services would be like research support, data reference. collections management, as well as for research data. We're starting to see data deposit services, data curation services, and data archiving. We also have in Canada at the national level some coordination around RDM in libraries. So CRL, which is the Canadian Association of Research Libraries, established the Portage network in around 2015. And it's really aiming to be a network of experts. So these would be librarians and library staff, as well as non-library experts coming together into expert groups or working groups. And they're also building national research data infrastructure and services. So things like the DMP Assistant, which is a data management planning tool, the Federated Research Data Repository, FRDR, which is a national research data discovery and repository for large data. There are also expert groups around digital preservation, discovery, and Dataverse North, which is a community of practice for Dataverse users in Canada. So Dataverse North was established as a Portage working group in 2016. Again, it's really just a community of practice at the moment for users and hosts of Dataverse in Canada. In 2018, the group put together a recommendation to put forward to build a national Dataverse service. We're still kind of in the early stages of thinking about that, but that's something that the Dataverse North working group recommended. And just to give you a sense, there are currently 6 hosted Dataverse instances across Canada. There's over 30 institutions and growing. And then within this Dataverse North group, there is a group focused on training, metadata and best practices, and a business models working group. So at Scholars Portal, we've hosted Dataverse since 2012, and it really just started as a self-service research data sharing platform. We just sort of put it out there. We wanted to see how the libraries would use it, how they would promote it to their researchers. We've seen a steady growth in the number of data sets be deposited since. We're currently running Dataverse version 4.8.6. And I know that's a little bit behind the latest release, but we're planning to upgrade probably in the early new year. And we have, just over 1,300 data sets published, over 87,000 downloads, and 1,100 registered users. And so this is providing the service to the 21 universities. The Dataverse team here at Scholars Portal is comprised of people who work on other services, but have skills and resources to dedicate specifically to Dataverse. So we have an RDM systems librarian who's actually located, it's like a cross appointment with Queen's University and Scholars Portal. And we thought that was a really great model because it allowed for us to get a better sense of the local needs, especially around research data management, where that was more difficult for the Scholars Portal team to get a sense of. We have a digital projects librarian working with us, a systems analyst, a senior developer, and 2 applications programmers. So here is just an overview of our system architecture. I'm not sure if this will be meaningful to you or not, but some of the unique things about this is that we are balancing the load on our Dataverse. So if you come to it, you may go to one or the other and they're a mirror of each other. And this is all done through an AJ proxy setup. We also have set up the R server system running on a separate virtual machine. And we're currently using NSF storage, local storage. We aren't using any cloud storage. The other thing that we set up once Dataverse had upgraded to version 4, we really wanted to take advantage of this flexible Dataverse model. So we decided to create institutional Dataverse containers for every school in OCL and then organize the deposits accordingly. So as much as possible, we encourage people to deposit within their institutional Dataverse, and we actually set up something in the sign-up form that would help us do that a little bit more like cleanly, so that way you aren't seeing a lot of stuff go in that wasn't under the institution. So in the sign-up page, users can affiliate with the school, And then there's some logic in the back end that matches that sign-up affiliation with the institutional Dataverse. And so the database contains the school name, the IP range, and the users. We also, in doing this for institutions, realized that they're probably going to be wanting access to metrics about their institutional Dataverse. So we set up an online a report that allows you to sort of chart some of the usage, number of data sets by Dataverse, number of downloads, size of Dataverse, that kind of thing that we were being requested. And so this is an institution-specific report that users can filter down and get access to their own institution data and then download it into a spreadsheet if they want. And so this is providing monthly stats in a full year view. And users can get to this directly from the Dataverse site. The other thing that we wanted to provide to our users was an interface for them to visualize the data and the metadata associated with tabular files. So we decided to build this tool called the Data Explorer, which is really just showing you a table view of your data set, and it allows for some interactivity where you can click on a variable and you can visualize the summary statistics in a pie chart or a bar chart depending on the number of categories in your data. And then from here you can easily search variables, get a list of all the variables, subset, and download directly from this tool as well. So this is something that we built back in 2016, I believe. And the other piece to the Data Explorer is this ability to cross-tabulate two or more variables. So if you were to select two variables, you could easily drag them in, you could either reorder them in the table view to show the cross-tabulation. So you can drag from row or column, and it shows the distribution. So the darker colors are the higher Z-scores and the lighter ones are the lowers. So this is just showing like a expectancy distribution, which is kind of neat. And we've also encountered a lot of technical challenges in working with Dataverse. So of course there's the 2 GB file limit. We're also finding that users with larger than 1 GB tabular files, those aren't as easily ingested into the system. There's also a lot of reports of slow upload and download from certain internet connections, especially those that are off campus, not on the university network. It's also difficult for us as a team hosting Dataverse to balance the user community development requests versus the need for us to work closely with the core code. Because for a while we had been maintaining a version of Dataverse that had a lot of changes and customizations to it, and it is really difficult to maintain that. So we've switched over to working more closely with the core code and trying to push for requests from our community into the core. Another thing that we struggle with is incorporating usability testing into development workflows more. It's just something that overall I think Scholars Portal hasn't been doing all that often, and so Caitlin Newson, who's our digital projects librarian, she's been really helping us with thinking about that, especially for all of the new features that we're hoping to develop, which I'm going to talk to you about next. So we have a number of current development projects on the go. The first of which is internationalization. So we have a commitment to provide our services in both English and French. And so we're hoping that this project will help us with that. We also, as you know, we host an Archivematica instance, and we would like to explore ways that research data can be incorporated into those existing workflows for digital preservation in libraries. So we have started a phase 2 of the Archivematica integration project, which I'll talk to you about. As well, we recently received federal funding from Canary, which is the networking sort of consortium in Canada that puts out grant opportunities, and one of the grant opportunities was focused on RDM, and so we applied and we were successful. So we're starting a project to make Dataverse scale and support large files, as well as we've been working on a tool to enhance curation workflows by offering curators a tool that integrates with Dataverse called the Data Curation Tool. Okay, so internationalization, it was really a collaboration between BCI, which is the Quebec Province Consortium of Libraries, OCL, the Ontario group, and Scholars Portal University of Toronto Libraries, as well as Harvard, because we wanted to work so closely with them instead of maintaining our own code. So really what it aims to do is develop an open internationalized Dataverse for use in multiple languages, not just English and French, but any language could be set up and use this framework. It requires major changes to the core code framework, unfortunately, and we've been working very closely with the Harvard team to get out smaller, more iterative sort of developments. And so already as of 4.9, we have an internationalization feature, including a UI toggle. So that's available and ready to use for people. And so we're hoping to have all the final code developments done and released early 2019, which we're really excited about. So here's just a preview. This is in our development branch where we have English and French signed offered here. So you can see that the toggle is sort of in line with the design of the banner at the top. And so we got some help from the Dataverse team on that. And you can see here that it covers pretty much everything that isn't user contributed. So all of the metadata fields are translated, the labels for those, and all of the controlled vocabularies that are used that people can select from, those are all translated into and available for others to translate. And there have been a lot of different translations with contributions from the folks at DANS, which is in the Netherlands. They're working on a project called Dataverse EU, and so many EU countries have contributed translations that will most likely reuse this framework. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is Archivematica integration. So for a number of years now, there's been strong interest from the library community to preserve research data, but you know, as you probably all know, there sort of aren't established best practices to do this. There's still a lot of challenges and with research data, and there are a lot of domain-specific considerations to make. So in 2015, Scholars Portal and OCL worked with Artifactual Systems, which is the company that develops Archivematica, to draft and test a proof of concept workflow between Archivematica and Dataverse. And so basically, what you would do is, say you had Archivematica, you would configure Archivematica to talk to a specific Dataverse instance, which would then allow you to select and ingest Dataverse packages, including metadata, data files, original files, derivative files, which are those tabular file formats, and store all of these in an archival information package, and they would be referenced appropriately from within the METS metadata file, which is the standard metadata that Archivematica creates. And during this proof of concept workflow, we really took a look at some of the more interesting things in this, which I think, you know, at the time we found that research data formats weren't really all being recognized by Archivematica. And this is due to some of the limitations in the format policy registry at the time. And so here's just an example of what we would consider like full curation. So Archivematica would be able to identify what this format was. Perhaps they would have some rules around how to normalize that file. And some examples of that would be like images, JPEG to TIFF, and storing the original JPEG, that kind of thing. So that seemed to work for image files like that. Sort of the mid-tier curation we were looking for would be if Archivematica could identify the format, perhaps it wouldn't have any rules for normalizing it beyond the basic checks. And so some examples of files that we were noticing that weren't supported were SAS files or ArcGIS files. And I think some of that's changed, but this was sort of at the time. And then again, for like Stata and MATLAB files, there was just no basic support at all. So, and I think this was also written up at the time by another group based in the UK called JISC, who was also working on a project very similar and looking at using Archivematica. So phase two really, which started just this year, was really, it is a production release of this proof of concept workflow, plus some enhancements to the Dataverse selection process in the Archivematica dashboard. So you can actually see this is built into Archivematica now. So if you configure Archivematica to talk to a Dataverse instance, you can select Dataverse as a transfer type. And then here you can select individual data sets, which show you the dataset ID and the dataset name. So it makes it a lot easier for you to do that and then run the transfer. So the release of this is planned for Archivematica 1.8, which is due out very, very soon, any day now. And this will work with any Dataverse. So you can configure it to work with the Texas Digital Libraries one, with any Dataverse. So we're sort of labeling this as a beta release, as there are some limitations, and this is all documented on the wiki there, which I provided a link to, which documents the project, and it will have more up-to-date information about the limitations very shortly. So some of the ways we're envisioning using this is as part of our institutional preservation workflows, which I sort of already mentioned, which is that Permafrost service. So option one would be for our users who are Permafrost users to configure their own Archivematica instance to ingest Dataverse packages from their institutional Dataverse. This could be all of their institutional Dataverse or only selected Dataverse packages. And those would be processed by Archivematica, and the apes would be stored on the Ontario Library Research Cloud for long-term preservation. So a full service preservation workflow. And all of the policies about selection, retention, etc., would be managed by the local libraries, including, what they were willing to archive long-term and what would be the cost associated with that. That would all be completely up to them. And then option two, which again, because Archivematica completely open source, Dataverse completely open source, anybody can really install or use Archivematica or other services offered that use Archivematica and configure it to ingest Dataverse packages, again, in the same way as option one. And the apes can be stored in the OLRC or other storage if they have local or other long-term preservation storage that they'd like to tap into. And again, those policies and costs would be managed completely by the local library. So these are just some of the options that we're thinking about in offering this out to our local community. And I'm sure there are other ways that you can reuse this workflow as well. Another thing that we've been thinking about, and I'm not that involved in, but I just wanted to mention it here because I think there's some interest from your community around Duracloud, but there's been a lot of investigation here at Scholars Portal to set up a Duracloud instance hosted here at UTL for Canada. And this would be connected to the Ontario Library Research Cloud, hopefully with nodes across the country. So this could be connected to the Dataverse Archivematica workflow as well for flexible options for preservation of research data. And there is a lot of interest in developing this national preservation network here in Canada, similar to the DPN in the States. Okay, so talking more about the scalability and storage models piece, which we'd really like to improve. I think that in order to get Dataverse to scale better, we need to really optimize the system architecture. There are a lot of bottlenecks, and I think that we could optimize those. And so our systems team is closely looking into how they can set that up better. And one of the ways that they're thinking about doing that is to connect Dataverse to some cloud storage. So whether it's Amazon S3 storage or Swift object storage, which is what the OLRC is based off, to provide a solution for more scalable storage, but also for file downloading, because the system at the moment is it's causing a bottleneck where everything has to bypass through the Dataverse application itself, as opposed to getting the file directly from the storage. So those are some ideas. In terms of large file upload download, the 2 GB file limit can be increased. It's something that you can configure, and we've played around with it for a bit, but we notice some issues, and so we aren't really confident in how it will perform, and so we aren't willing to increase it. So I think it's that ours is configured now to 2.5 gigs because we had a request and they asked really nicely. But I think that overall what we need to do is develop some kind of large file upload utility that transfers directly from storage bypassing the Dataverse application. So some possible options for this, and we've been starting to talk about it with the Harvard and the TDL community and others who've joined in on these large file calls. But some possible options are this thing called the data capture module, which Harvard has developed, which is using rsync scripts to pass and transfer data. There's been some talk about a separate upload utility based in the browser. There's the Swift browser app that we could look at integrating this with. We've also talked about supporting Globus, which is a large file transfer utility that is used by researchers mostly in the physical sciences, but there are other users. And it's possible that they may never want to transfer their data over to Dataverse, but could keep that data elsewhere on large computational storage, but set up endpoints to access that data. And so Dataverse could talk to endpoints using the Globus standard, and that could be one way to support large files. And there are others. So we're just sort of scoping this out and trying to figure out what the best plan is. But this is one of the requirements of the grant, is to support large file upload and download. So the ideal system, I think, and we've talked a little bit about this and more discussion I'm sure will come, but it would be nice if Dataverse could handle files of 1 to 10 gigabytes, maybe up to 15 easily. No interference for end users, and this would all be in the browser. And if larger files needed to get in there, we could probably handle that through some kind of a separate application that users would have to identify with and say, I have a file larger than, say, this amount. Please initiate this tool so I can upload it separately. That kind of thing. The ideal system would also scale to support many, many users across Canada simultaneously. Another thing that I think an ideal system, and hopefully some of the solutions we've come up with for scalability will help us get there, but the DV storage can easily be increased if we get a request for someone willing to upload a terabyte of data. We can easily support that by increasing the storage capacity for the system, as well as we need to establish ways to connect to our existing storage services, such as the OLRC, which does have a built-in cost model for institutions, because it doesn't make sense for the consortium to provide unlimited storage to institutions. So we need to be able to cost that back to the individual institutions who are uploading this data. So one of the other pieces to the grant that we're working on is supporting enhanced curation workflows. And we really want to do this using a separate application called the data curation tool. So in our minds, data curation, and there are many different definitions, but the way we framed it is data curation includes adding contextual metadata to variables in the Dataverse. So this would be things like labels, or categories, if they weren't already labeled appropriately, concepts used to define the data that a user could input, question text associated with a survey question, for example, universe statements, for example, who was asked this question if it's a survey, those kinds of things could be added. And this would all be using the Data Documentation Initiative metadata standards. So these are all fields supported in the metadata standard DVI. Another thing that this tool would do is create a DDI XML file that could be added on to the Dataverse DDI XML file that's already produced. And this would be at the variable level, and it would also help facilitate the generation of a detailed dataset codebook, which could be reused in DV to accompany datasets. And basically what this codebook would allow for is assist end users with understanding the data. So it would help with reuse, as well as assist us, librarians, digital archivists, with creating open standards for describing data, and not just study level data, but variable level data as well. So here is the prototype view of the tool. So you can see that it's taking a particular data set, the data set name is appearing. You can search for variables in the same way you can search in the Data Explorer. You can create groups of variables. So I've created the group demography. Perhaps you'd want to put all of your demographic variables in there. You can also view summary statistics using the View button, and there is an Edit button as well. So here's editing variable metadata. So you can see I've selected variable 2, and it's allowing me to edit the label for my variable if I need to. I can also add literal question, interviewer instructions, universe statement, any notes. And we can also do this thing called weight this variable. Oops. So we're not quite sure if it fits into this form, but we also want to allow the user to declare and apply weights. So in survey data, you often have weight variables, which allow you to weight that particular variable in a way that it would be more representative of, say, the US general population or something. And so this weight variable may be attached to the data set, and this tool would allow you to declare that as the weight variable and then apply that weight to any other variable in your data set. And this would allow for the showing of weighted frequencies in the view, as well as in the Data Explorer app. And so all of this metadata could be reused in other pieces of Dataverse, including Data Explorer, but also for searching. You could search on question text, you could search on notes, and hopefully it would help with data discovery overall. So here's sort of an overview of the workflow. A researcher uploads a tabular data set to Dataverse, and you can see here that I'm waiting for it to ingest, and then once it's ingested, you're going to see the Explore button appear, and that's standard for everybody. But then you'll also be presented, if you have the appropriate permissions as an editor, to configure this data set, and then from there you'll see the drop down for the data curation tool, and that's what will initiate the separate data curation tool application. The user then edits the metadata, and then they save this metadata back to Dataverse, which gets stored in the database for reuse in Dataverse. So in all of this, in data curation tool and other developments, really our approach is a modular approach. So we want everybody who's using Dataverse to either choose to use this or choose not to use this. We don't want to impact any other pieces of the core code. In some cases, some core code changes are required. For example, in the case of the data curation tool, we do need there to be more DDI support in the database, which is a core code change. As well, we need new APIs to support these database changes and the writing to and from these separate applications. In some cases, we do need UI usability testing, and so it'd be great to sync up with the Harvard team and the Dataverse community around what it is exactly, your users would like to see versus my users, and try to come up with a design that works for the community. In terms of the data curation tool, our plan is to release this probably around May to June next year, and then other changes and projects that we're working on, the plan is to release for closer to the end of the grant, which is in 2020. So it's an 18-month project. So just next steps for us. So we are planning to release Internationalization in early 2019 with the onboarding of Quebec universities in early 2019. So that's really exciting for us. So we will grow from a group of 21 to, I think, almost 40 schools. So that's really exciting. And again, that's because of internationalization allows us to offer Dataverse in French. We have the development projects from the Canary Grant going on, including the curation tool, large file support, and the storage integration. And that's all happening over the next year and a half. And we're really excited about coming to talk to the community again at the Dataverse community meeting in June 2019. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. Are there any questions, or I have questions for you guys, if not.
Amber, thank you so much. That just reinforced for me how much alignment there is between the Texas Data Repository at TDL and the Scholars Portal Dataverse. In particular, things like large file storage that's disambiguated from Dataverse, looking at different ways to get larger files in. I'm very excited about your DDI initiative, the DCT. That's absolutely wonderful. And I think in Texas in particular, internationalization is a really interesting development that I think that we could take advantage of, certainly in Texas with so many Spanish speakers and so many universities here serving Hispanic communities. So just thank you again. And I think we have one question from Michael Nugent right now in chat, so I'll go ahead and ask you that. Why might a local institution choose to take something from Dataverse into Archivematica?
So my sense is that institutions who've opened up Dataverse for their user community would like to take advantage of the Archivematica workflow to fully preserve that file in all of the ways that you would preserve other kinds of digital data and library collection. So they're viewing it as a library collection, I think, and they're willing to take long-term archiving responsibilities for that data. So to them, I think Dataverse is a great place to go and access that data. You know, it's hosted by Scholars Portal. We know it's going to be probably around for, you know, a fair number of years, but it's like a distinct, it's an access copy. It's not really that preservation copy. And I think that having an institution decide to archive research data is fairly new for a lot of Ontario University libraries, but it's definitely a direction that I think many libraries see themselves taking on. So for them to do that and then use Archivematica themselves, it means that they're taking that responsibility as opposed to Scholars Portal taking that responsibility to archive that content for the long term. Although I think that at some point we'll probably need to have those conversations and there could be shared management of these collections in the future. We just have not got to that. So this is sort of a first step.
And I'll add to that too, Amber, from our perspective at TDL, our first step in terms of a next level of digital preservation provided to Dataverse content is going to be using the Chronopolis digital preservation storage infrastructure. of which TDL is already a member, as sort of that preservation backend. But I'm very excited about the Archivematica edition, especially the fact that people can go ahead if they're local users of Archivematica and then still attach it to a shared Dataverse like yours or like the Texas Data Repository.
Yeah, that's interesting. So is it that your Dataverse, all of your Dataverse will go through Globus?
That's what we're hoping to do. We've got a project plan for next year to look at that. Yeah. And so that would be, I guess you would kind of consider it the next level up before you get to the creating these robust archival information packages like something like Archivematica would do.
I see. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that we've, talked about doing. I think that it could be a requirement of us if we decided to seek out Trusted Digital Repository status or certification, the Core Trust Seal. I think that Dataverse does a great job of providing access copies, like I said, but it isn't a preservation system, and perhaps we would have to do something at the instance level as well. Yeah.
And Amber, for your information too, Michael Nugent, who asked that question, has been building the requirements. He's been documenting all the requirements for the TDR Dataverse's Core Trust Seal certification. So,
That's great. Okay.
so we're working on that too, and hopefully that'll be useful to you once we've completed ours.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't see any other questions in chat yet, so just a reminder to folks on the call, if you have questions, please do place them in chat, and I will ask them on your behalf of Amber. But Amber, you said you wanted to ask us some questions?
Yeah, well, I mean, you sort of already answered some of this, but I'm glad to hear that, pieces of this will be useful for your community as well. I mean, in general, what other challenges do you face in running Dataverse? I guess that was the other question I had.
So many of the ones that you mentioned are our biggest challenges, but especially the files. So as you might be aware, Amber, we just had Jim Myers, who is a contracted developer, who's actually based at Harvard. He's been working for TDL, and he worked on something called the DV uploader, which is a command line bulk uploader for Dataverse. However, it still uses the Dataverse API. So it's still limited to 1,000 files, and it's still limited to the size limits in Dataverse. We've upped ours as well. We've had people ask very nicely too, to be able to put larger files in. And so your comments about wanting files, between 2 and 10 gigs to be painless for people to upload, I think that's going to be important to us too. And I feel like the global community is going to push on that quite a bit because it seems to be one of the biggest things that we need. And then also I think, yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, like, I think that we could solve a lot of people's needs with just, improving that up to 10 gigs or 15 gigs, because we see some requests for really large file or large amounts of data, but not large files. And we have a separate repository, national repository for really large data. And I don't think we want to put that data necessarily in Dataverse, but we'll see. There's always interesting things that are coming up. So
yeah, we've had our Jessica Tree Logan, who is our liaison at UT Libraries for the TDR, has especially asked for that ability that you mentioned to just have a reference to data that's stored elsewhere, so very large data that's stored elsewhere, but that you have all the metadata in Dataverse and it just kind of points to it. So I think that's something that we would love to see too. We will be watching so much of your work so closely. And we also had Michael said in chat here too that one of the things that that we need is researcher buy-in, a champion high up at the chain. How has that experience been for you in terms of having a champion?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was at a meeting that was held by the CRL Portage group in the spring, and they had invited a researcher from Ryerson University who's working on social media data, and they're using Dataverse. And they were such a champion, and it just changed the whole tone in the room. It was like, how can we strive to do better than what we're even doing just to support this? Because, one of the things that that person said was, if I hadn't known about this, I would have done it myself, and it would not be as good. And that partnering with libraries is such an amazing thing. And he was just so positive and so supportive of this direction for the libraries. So I completely agree with you. And finding those people and engaging with them and having them speak on your behalf is really nice.
That'll be our next webinar series next year.
Yeah, for sure.
Any other questions in chat for Amber? I will say one other thing while we're waiting to see if other questions come up. You were saying that the OLRC already has a way to charge back, basically, storage, and that's why, we have the same problem with the TDR where we obviously can't promise unending storage. We haven't hit limits yet. We've only been around for just over a year, so but we anticipate that problem as well. So we'll probably also be looking really closely at your chargeback model and see how you start integrating that with your Dataverse usage.
Yeah, it is an interesting question. I mean, we want to tread lightly because I think that researchers are used to very cheap storage, and in libraries that doesn't really exist. So
True.
it's going to be challenging, but we never really want to charge researchers, so that's not the aim. It's really to sort of set up a way for us to charge back to institutions, perhaps on a yearly basis.
Oh, interesting. So more at the institutional level, but then being able to provide a framework so that the researchers, when they're asking for funding, can make sure that they get that funding set aside for the university, I assume.
It's possible. I think that when they have those conversations with the local support unit, that they will be able to provide those numbers because they could choose to charge them something different. So it's going to be interesting. Yeah.
I'll ask you one more question since no one's in chat here. So I was really interested in the beginning when you were talking about your different OCL communities and your working groups, and in particular, wondered how your OCL geo community has responded to Dataverse and if you're finding a lot of use there by the geo community.
Yeah, that's a good question. So they are interested in RDM. I haven't seen a lot of uptake from them. I think that they feel that Dataverse lacks a bit in terms of the support for geospatial data. But I would say too, we haven't set up connections to like the Open GeoServer or the World Map tool that's based at Harvard. We have a sort of long history of providing access to geospatial data through our geoportal. So people sort of are used to that look and feel of the map and having the map be front and center. And Dataverse is sort of like this really metadata focused tool for them. And so I think it takes away from some of the spatial pieces or the visualization of that data. We have had a lot of requests for people to add research data to our geoportal. And, I think that isn't really a sustainable model, and we would love to see more enhancements to Dataverse to support that kind of data and visualization. So there is a project coming out of UBC. It's very new, and it was also from that Canary grant that we received. They're aiming to build a more open connection between Dataverse and the open source GeoServer tool, which would allow people to host their own GeoServer, and it might be a little bit more lightweight than what the current Harvard integration offers. And then on top of that, they want to put GeoBlacklight because Dataverse doesn't really do geo-discovery very well. There isn't a way for you to look and find data by visualizing it on a map. whereas GeoBlacklight offers that. So anyway, I think taking a look at what they're doing is going to be something we do over the next couple of years as we start to think about how we manage geospatial research data. So yeah,
Oh, wow.
we've heard of that from the community, that it isn't that great at the moment.
Yeah, we're hearing the same thing, and I was not aware of that University of British Columbia project, so I'm excited about that, in particular the Geo Blacklight piece. That's awesome.
Yeah, it sounds really like a cool meshing together of GeoBlacklight and Dataverse. So
So I'm not seeing any more questions in chat, so we might be able to let you go 5 minutes early. I do want to say thank you one more time, and I also want to say, think of us. You mentioned potentially needing folks for testing, so usability testing, testing and collaboration on the internationalization project and that sort of thing. And I think those are the kinds of things that I could take back to the Texas Data Repository Steering Committee, and you might be highly likely to find interest in our community. And so we would love to make ourselves available to you. So let us know, either inside the global Dataverse community or just, reach out, and hopefully we can find testers for all of these exciting developments, because everything you showed us today is really exciting.
yeah, that would be great. So are you guys members of the global consortium now?
Yes, we were the
You are.
first.
You were the first. Okay, so I need to get on. I need to get on it, but I made a goal for myself to fill out the form and get it approved, and then move forward. But yeah, I think definitely sharing whenever we're interested in getting UI testing, that would be really nice to have it come from the community. So for sure, I'll
Yeah,
share that.
please do. All right, I'm going to thank you once again and then let you go on about your day. Thank you so much for doing this for us, Amber, taking time out and talking with us and sharing this information. We are going to do some closed captioning on this webinar, and we'll provide access to it. And so you'll be able to share that as well among your community.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you everybody who attended today. Take care. Leah, you can stop recording whenever you're ready.